The plain stretched endlessly, a vast sea of golden grasses rolling under the fading sun. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the distant smoke of campfires. The cowboy rode slowly, his horse's hooves pressing a rhythm into the earth, a rhythm that mirrored the quiet, lonely cadence of his life. Years of wandering had hardened him, carving lines of solitude across his weather-beaten face. His name was Samuel Cole, though most only knew him as Cole, a drifter who carried nothing but his horse, his gun, and a past he preferred to leave unspoken. Cole's life had been one of loss, a family decimated by disease, a town he had once called home burned to the ground, and a heart left raw and unhealed. He roamed the frontier not out of adventure but necessity, moving wherever the land allowed, wherever work sometimes menial, sometimes dangerous was offered. The silence of the plain suited him. The empty horizon mirrored the emptiness he felt inside. But the solitude, he knew, was a fragile comfort, constantly threatened by the unpredictable wild. On this particular evening, as the sun dipped toward the western horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange, red, and violet, Cole noticed the unnatural tension in the air. His horse pricked its ears, nostrils flaring, muscles coiled. A low, eerie growl echoed across the grasslands. Cole's instincts sharpened. Wolves. A pack, hungry and bold, moving with silent efficiency, stalking prey. He had seen wolf tracks before, but hearing the growl in the growing darkness brought an adrenaline rush he hadn't felt in years. Then he saw her, a young woman, perhaps barely in her 20s, crouched behind a fallen log. Her dark hair tangled and matted. Her clothing was torn, streaked with dirt and dried blood, evidence of a struggle. Her eyes, wide with fear, darted to the approaching wolves, and she clutched a makeshift spear, shaking, but too small and too weak to defend herself. Cole's first thought was not pity, but strategy. He had to act fast. Dismounting with practiced speed, he pulled his rifle from its leather holster, scanning the darkness. The wolves had sensed him too. Their yellow eyes reflected the dying sunlight, their teeth bared in anticipation. With careful aim, he fired a warning shot, the bullet whistling through the air. The wolves scattered momentarily, growling and snapping in frustration. But he knew it wouldn't hold them off for long. Cole approached the young woman slowly, his hands raised in a non-threatening manner. "It's okay," he called softly, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. "I'm here. You're safe now." The woman's gaze flickered to him, disbelief and suspicion mingling with relief. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling, nearly lost in the wind. "Name's Cole," he replied. "Now move, stay close to me, and don't make sudden moves." She hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded, recognizing that the wolves were circling again, closer this time. Together, they moved toward a nearby rocky outcrop, using its uneven terrain for cover. Cole's experience in the wilderness gave him an edge. He knew the wolves would hesitate to follow into rocky, uneven ground, especially with a human present out once behind the rocks. Cole positioned himself between the woman and the wolves. He fired again, this time with more precision, striking near a wolf and sending it yelping into the shadows. The rest of the pack hesitated, uncertain. Cole's calm, steady demeanor and strategic movements convinced them that the wolves were facing a formidable opponent, and gradually the pack retreated into the darkness, their silhouettes vanishing into the night. Only then did Cole turn to the young woman, whose body was trembling violently. "You're safe now," he reassured her. "They won't bother you anymore tonight." She sank to the ground, relief washing over her, mingled with lingering terror. I thought they would kill me," she whispered. Her voice broke, and for the first time, Cole saw the depth of vulnerability behind her defiance and pride. She was brave yet fragile, and he felt an unexpected surge of protective instinct, something he hadn't felt for anyone in years. Cole offered her water from his canteen, and she drank gratefully, her hands shaking. She didn't speak much, only nodded in response to his questions. Yet there was something in her gaze and unspoken acknowledgement, a connection forged in shared danger. That night, they made a small camp behind the rocks, using brush and fallen branches to shield themselves from the chill. Cole kept watch while she slept fitfully, her face pale in the firelight. He thought of the vast loneliness of the plains, the endless nights like this, and for the first time, he didn't feel alone. Someone's life had intersected with his, in the most dangerous and profound way possible. When she finally looked at him in the morning, the fear had not vanished entirely, but there was gratitude, and something deeper, a quiet determination. She spoke simply, almost with certainty, "You're my man now." Cole blinked at her, caught off guard by the statement. He wasn't used to being claimed, to having someone depend on him. But in her eyes he saw something that mirrored his own solitude, a need for trust, for protection, for connection. And in that instant, the vast emptiness of the plains felt smaller, filled with possibility, danger, and the fragile spark of a new beginning. The encounter with the wolves was just the beginning. It had forced two solitary souls together, thrusting them into a shared struggle for survival and eventually trust. Cole, the lonely cowboy, and the Apache woman, brave yet vulnerable, would soon discover that life on the frontier was as unpredictable as it was harsh, and that in each other, they might just find the family they had both longed for. The morning sun rose pale and timid, filtering through wisps of cloud over the vast plains. Cole had kept watch through the night, his rifle close at hand, his horse tethered nearby. The Apache woman stirred, her dark eyes blinking sleep away, shadowed by the memory of wolves' growls. She moved with quiet wariness, but there was a fire in her posture, an unyielding strength that made Cole take notice. She wasn't helpless. She had survived the night, and she had survived alone until fate had brought him. Cole offered her a piece of jerky and a sip of water, gestures simple but loaded with meaning. She accepted them silently, still wary, and finally spoke. "Thank you for saving me," she said softly. Her accent was lilting, grounded in her Apache tongue but easily understandable in English. There was a pause, a hesitation, as if she were measuring the truth in his eyes. "You'll be safer moving with me than alone," Cole replied. "The plains aren't forgiving, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better." She nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. The wilderness demanded respect, and she knew enough to heed his experience. Yet pride and instinct clashed with submission. "I can handle myself too," she said quietly, though there was no challenge in her tone, just a matter-of-fact assertion. Cole smiled faintly. He could see that she was strong, and that her strength would be necessary for the journey ahead. They set out together, riding carefully through the uneven terrain. Cole took the lead, his sharp eyes scanning for threats, while she stayed close, her hands steady on her makeshift spear and the reins of her horse. The landscape around them was breathtaking, but treacherous rolling hills dotted with rocky outcroppings, streams with slick stones, and patches of dense brush where snakes and coyotes might lurk. Every step demanded attention. Every sound could signal danger, that it wasn't long before they encountered another threat. A sudden thunderstorm broke overhead, rain pelting down in icy sheets. The ground turned to mud, and Cole's horse struggled to find footing. The Apache woman's horse skidded dangerously close to a cliff edge, and in an instant, Cole was beside her, steadying the animal and pulling her back to safety. Heart racing, he looked into her eyes. "You okay?" "Yes," she stammered, breathless but unhurt. In that instant, she realized that his protection wasn't patronizing. It was deliberate, precise, and attentive. There was a silent promise in his actions. He would not let harm touch her if he could prevent it. Hours later, after the storm had passed, they found temporary shelter in a hollowed-out cave beneath a rocky bluff. The Apache woman gathered dry brush for a small fire, showing that she knew how to survive in the wild. Cole observed silently, impressed. Her resourcefulness was clear. She wasn't just a damsel in distress. She had skills honed by life on the plains, skills that complemented his own. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, conversation grew easier between them. She spoke of her tribe, the traditions she had grown up with, and the journey that had led her to this perilous spot. Cole shared little of his past, not because he was untrusting, but because silence was a shield he had perfected over years of solitude. Still, in sharing small details, his familiarity with the terrain, his knowledge of tracking and hunting, he built a bridge of trust between them. Trust, however, is tested not in comfort but in danger. The next day, as they crossed a narrow canyon, they heard the rumble of hooves behind them. A group of outlaws, notorious for raiding travelers along this stretch of the frontier, had spotted them. Cole's instincts kicked in immediately. He guided the Apache woman to a concealed path along the cliff, crouching behind boulders as the outlaws approached. They were armed and reckless, their intent clear. Cole whispered instructions, moving with precision, positioning her behind cover, ensuring she was safe while he engaged the threat. A tense standoff ensued. Cole's calm, measured actions allowed them to avoid a deadly confrontation, and the outlaws eventually passed, unaware of the narrow escape. The Apache woman, heart-pounding, looked at him with newfound respect. You saved us again," she said softly. There was admiration in her voice, but more importantly, a spark of connection, a recognition that survival depended on each other, that they could face the dangers of the plains together. By the time they reached a river valley later that evening, the dynamic between them had shifted. The Apache woman no longer saw Cole merely as a rescuer. She saw him as a partner, someone whose experience and instincts complemented her own resilience. And Cole, for the first time in years, felt the presence of someone whose courage and intelligence earned his respect, not a burden. Not a responsibility, but a companion. As they made camp along the riverbank, she spoke quietly, almost as if confessing to herself, "I trust you." Cole met her gaze, the weight of unspoken history and hardened loneliness softening slightly. "And I trust you," he replied. It wasn't a declaration of affection yet, but a foundation of something stronger, a partnership forged in adversity, in shared danger. And in the silent acknowledgement of each other's worth, the plains were still wild and unforgiving, and challenges awaited them at every turn, but the bond between them had taken root. Trust, hard-earned and tested in fire, was now the most valuable weapon they had. And as night fell over the valley, they sat together by the fire, not just survivors of the wilderness, but allies in a dangerous world, aware that the journey ahead would demand all their strength, wits, and courage together. The morning sun rose pale and trembling over the plains, casting long, wavering shadows across the dry grasses. Cole and the Apache woman had spent the night in a narrow canyon, sheltered from the biting wind. Both were aware that each new day brought potential danger. Though they had survived the wolves and the storm, the frontier was unforgiving, and the memory of past threats kept their senses sharp. They moved cautiously along a narrow trail flanked by steep ridges, the air tense with the distant sounds of the wild. The cry of a hawk overhead, the rustle of unseen animals in the grass, and the occasional sharp whistle of wind between rock formations. Cole led the way, his eyes constantly scanning for movement, his hand near the rifle slung across his shoulder. Behind him, the Apache woman rode silently, her posture alert, her dark eyes scanning the terrain with the same precision as his. It was then that they saw the first signs: disturbed dust along the path ahead, the glint of metal catching the sunlight, and the unmistakable silhouettes of men armed with rifles and pistols, waiting in ambush. Outlaws. Cole's jaw tightened. He had encountered their kind before, bandits who took what they wanted without mercy, preying on travelers for profit or cruelty. He signaled the woman to stay low, pointing to a rocky outcrop that could provide cover. "Stay behind me." Cole whispered, though he knew this time they couldn't simply avoid the confrontation. The outlaws had spotted them, and their menacing laughter echoed across the canyon walls. The Apache woman's hand tightened around her spear, and though fear flickered in her eyes, there was a determined resolve as well. She was no longer merely the frightened figure he had rescued. She was a warrior in her own right, shaped by a lifetime of survival. Cole and the woman crouched behind the rocks, formulating a plan. The outlaws had underestimated them, thinking two solitary travelers would be easy prey. Cole studied their formation, noting their angles of approach and the limited cover along the path. He whispered instructions, not in a commanding way, but as a shared strategy. The Apache woman nodded, her understanding immediate. As the outlaws advanced, Cole fired a warning shot, forcing them to pause. The tension in the air was electric. But when one of the men tried to flank them, it was the Apache woman who acted first. She hurled a rock with precise force, striking a man in the arm and forcing him to drop his weapon. Her quick thinking bought them precious seconds. Cole watched, impressed and relieved. Her courage was not reckless, it was calculated and effective. The confrontation escalated quickly. Cole fired his rifle, using the terrain for cover, while the woman maneuvered to a higher rock ledge, hurling stones and shouting to distract the attackers. Her bravery was undeniable, and it gave Cole the opening he needed to disarm two of the outlaws, forcing the rest to retreat. The battle was short but intense, leaving both of them breathless, covered in dust and sweat, but victorious. After the outlaws fled, the woman slumped to the ground, her chest heaving. Cole approached her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You were incredible," he said, admiration plain in his voice. "I wouldn't have managed without you." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with a mixture of pride and relief. "I had to," she replied simply. "You saved me once. Now we save each other." Her words were more than a statement of fact. They were a declaration of equality, a recognition that survival on the frontier required partnership, trust, and courage from both sides. As they continued their journey, the landscape seemed different. The plains were still wild and dangerous, but now they faced it as a unit rather than as individuals. Every step forward reinforced their bond. They shared the tasks of traveling, hunting for food, scouting for safe paths, setting up camps, and keeping watch through the night. Each task strengthened their reliance on one another. By evening, they reached a small, secluded valley, perfect for making camp. Cole built a fire, and the Apache woman gathered herbs and kindling, her movements precise and confident. As the flames danced between them, they shared stories, not of past misfortunes, but of hopes, traditions, and dreams. She spoke of her tribe, her childhood among the vast mesas, and her knowledge of the land's hidden resources. Cole, still guarded but increasingly open, shared his experiences of the plains, his encounters with danger, and the hard lessons learned from years of solitude. It was in these quiet moments, away from immediate danger, that their connection deepened. Trust had been forged in the heat of conflict, but respect and admiration had grown in shared survival, in understanding each other's strengths, fears, and resilience. Finally, as the stars blanketed the night sky, she turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "I know the plains are dangerous, but with you, I feel like I can survive anything." Cole met her gaze, something in him uncoiling, a rare vulnerability he hadn't shown to anyone in years. "We'll survive it together," he said. It wasn't a promise of romance yet, but it was a pledge of unity, a recognition that they were stronger as a team than apart. That night, as they slept side by the campfire's dying embers, the Apache woman dreamt of freedom, safety, and a future where she was no longer hunted or alone. Cole dreamt too, not of past losses, but of the possibility of connection, of someone whose courage matched his own, someone whose presence could fill the emptiness he had carried for so long in the harsh wilderness where danger was constant. And trust was rare. Two solitary souls had found each other. Through shared fear and shared triumph, they had forged a bond that neither the wolves, nor the storm, nor the outlaws could break. And in that bond, each discovered something they had long thought lost: hope, courage, and the first fragile threads of companionship that might one day become something deeper. The plains stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun, waves of heat rising from the golden grasses. Cole guided his horse steadily, but he noticed the Apache woman riding with a quiet thoughtfulness, her gaze tracing distant ridges, her fingers brushing lightly along the reins. The journey had been long, and the dangers frequent. Yet she moved with confidence, a testament to the resilience forged by a lifetime surviving on her own. They had been traveling together for several days now, and the initial tension between them had softened into a rhythm of mutual reliance. Cole had come to value her instincts, her keen eyes, and the way she seemed to anticipate danger before it appeared. Yet, despite this growing trust, there was still a guarded distance in her demeanor, a quiet sadness that lingered beneath her brave exterior. Cole, accustomed to solitude himself, recognized it immediately, a reflection of his own hidden wounds. One evening, as they set up camp near a clear mountain stream, the Apache woman collected firewood while Cole prepared a small meal. The gentle trickle of water and the distant calls of wildlife created a momentary calm, a pause in the ever-present tension of the wilderness. Cole watched her quietly, noticing the way she moved with purpose, how her hands were steady despite the fatigue of travel. He realized that she was more than just a survivor. She was a teacher in her own way, showing him how to move through the land with respect, caution, and skill. Finally, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and violet, the woman spoke, her voice hesitant but determined. "I haven't told you much about myself," she said. "You should know. There's more to me than what you've seen." Cole nodded, sensing that this was important. "I'm listening," he said simply, offering her space to share without pressure. She sat down by the fire, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "I was born in a small Apache village," she began, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "My parents, they were taken by raiders when I was young. I survived on my own, moving from place to place, learning the ways of the land, hunting, foraging, and protecting myself. Every day was a struggle, every night a test. I learned to trust my instincts, to read the signs of nature, to move unseen when danger approached." Cole listened intently, the weight of her story settling over him. He could feel the parallels between her life and his own, the loneliness, the constant vigilance, the reliance on one's own skill to survive. But unlike him, she had been forged in adversity from the very beginning. Her courage and resourcefulness shaped by loss and necessity. "I've had to make choices most people can't imagine," she continued. "I've faced starvation, storms, wild animals, and the cruelty of men. And yet I am still here. I am still alive." Her gaze met Cole's, unwavering. "That is why I fight and why I survive. And that is why I will not be a burden to you or anyone else." Cole felt a profound respect for her, mingled with a quiet admiration. Her strength was not just physical but emotional, born of hardship and endurance. "You're no burden," he said. "Not now, not ever. And I don't think I could survive out here without you." As the fire crackled, they spoke of the land itself, of secret paths, hidden watering holes, and the subtle signs of weather and wildlife. She taught him how to read tracks in the soil, how to distinguish edible plants from poisonous ones, and how to use the terrain to their advantage. Her knowledge was practical, honed by necessity, and Cole found himself relying on her guidance more than he had expected. Through shared tasks and teachings, their connection deepened. Trust evolved into companionship, and companionship began to hint at something more tender. Cole noticed small gestures, the way she looked out for him without being asked, the quiet pride in her voice when he successfully implemented her advice, and the rare moments when she allowed herself to smile despite the hardships of their journey. One evening, as they sat by a campfire, Cole broke the silence. "I've wandered these plains for years," he said quietly, "never trusting anyone, never letting anyone get close. But with you, it's different. I feel like I'm not alone anymore." She reached for his hand, a simple touch, but heavy with meaning. "You're not alone," she whispered, "and neither am I. We can face this together." Their hands remained joined as night enveloped the valley, a silent promise forming between them. The Apache woman's courage, her history, and her wisdom had not only helped them survive, but had begun to heal the loneliness they had both carried for so long. She had become more than a partner in survival. She was becoming a companion in life, someone whose presence mattered in ways neither of them had anticipated. The night passed with an unusual calm, the stars overhead stretching endlessly across the sky. Cole watched her sleep for a moment, noting the peacefulness etched across her features. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future not defined solely by loss and solitude, but by connection, trust, and perhaps even love. By morning, they were ready to move again. The Apache woman's skills would continue to guide them through the dangers ahead, and Cole's experience and protection would complement hers. They were no longer simply two individuals thrown together by circumstance. They were a team bound by trust, shared knowledge, and the beginning of an emotional connection that neither could deny. In the harsh expanse of the frontier, their bond had become their greatest strength, and as they rode forward, the promise of survival intertwined with the hope of something deeper, something neither wolves, storms, nor outlaws could destroy. The horizon glowed with the soft light of dawn, casting long shadows over the rolling plains. Cole and the Apache woman rode side by side, their horses steady and sure-footed. The journey had been long, testing their strength, courage, and endurance. Every day had brought new dangers: wolves, storms, treacherous terrain, and the occasional band of ruthless outlaws. But through it all, they had grown inseparable. The Apache woman, whose name was Nayeli, had revealed her past, shared her survival skills, and shown Cole the depth of her courage. In return, Cole had shown her not just protection, but patience, understanding, and quiet respect. Each challenge they overcame strengthened their bond, transforming it from mere trust into a profound connection neither had anticipated. That morning, as they descended into a lush river valley, Cole pointed toward a small settlement in the distance, a few clustered wooden buildings, a blacksmith smoke curling into the sky, and the promise of safety. "We've made it," he said softly. "We can rest here, resupply, maybe even start over." Nayeli's eyes shone with cautious hope. "A fresh start," she murmured. The thought of a place where they could be more than survivors, where they could be people rather than hunted souls, stirred something deep within her. She had known the wilderness, its beauty and its brutality, but she had never imagined a life that included peace, companionship, or a home. As they approached the settlement, Cole remained alert. Danger still lingered in the world, and he was unwilling to take chances. But Nayeli, riding beside him, exuded quiet confidence. She had faced death countless times, yet she had survived, and she knew that with Cole beside her, they could overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. The townsfolk regarded them with curious eyes. Cole dismounted, steadying his horse, while Nayeli followed, graceful and alert. A few children peeked from behind wooden fences, whispering excitedly to one another at the sight of the tall cowboy and the striking Apache woman. Cole introduced them cautiously, careful to respect Nayeli's boundaries while acknowledging the reality of their arrival. Over the following days, they settled into a rhythm within the town. Cole found work at the local ranch, his skills in horsemanship and frontier survival earning the respect of the townspeople. Nayeli contributed as well, teaching some of the younger girls about tracking, herbal remedies, and the ways of the land. Slowly, the town came to accept them not as strangers, but as part of the community, a small, quiet family of two who had found each other in the harshest of places. One evening, after a day of hard work, Nayeli and Cole sat on a wooden porch overlooking the valley. The sky painted with twilight colors. The air was calm, the only sounds the distant chatter of townsfolk and the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees. Nayeli turned to Cole, her expression serious but tender. "You've kept me safe," she said softly. "Not just from the wolves or the outlaws, but from the loneliness I've carried all my life. I trust you completely, Cole. You're my man now." Cole's heart clenched at her words. For years he had wandered alone, believing connection was a liability. That trust led only to pain. Yet here was someone who had faced every danger of the frontier, yet chose to place her trust in him, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. He took her hand in his fingers brushing gently against hers. "And you're mine," he replied, his voice steady but full of emotion. "We'll face the world together, Nayeli. No more running, no more hiding. Together." Tears glimmered in her eyes, not of fear, but of relief and joy. In that moment, the frontier, the endless plains, the dangers, the loneliness seemed to shrink around them. All that mattered was the bond they had forged, the trust they had built, and the future they could create together. The days that followed were filled with quiet, joy, and the small routines of a shared life. They worked side by side, hunted together, and rested together, learning the rhythms of a partnership that was as much emotional as practical. Cole, who had once believed he was destined to wander forever, discovered the profound comfort of someone who understood him, respected him, and shared the same determination to survive and thrive. Nayeli, who had known loss and solitude since childhood, learned that safety and love were not illusions, but possibilities worth embracing. Her life, once defined by fear and survival, began to include hope, laughter, and the warmth of companionship. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the valley, Cole and Nayeli stood on a hill overlooking the settlement, the wind carrying the scents of wildflowers and sagebrush. She rested her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her. For the first time in years, both felt the profound sense of belonging they had longed for, but never thought they would find. "You saved me once," Nayeli whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "But you've given me so much more. Life, hope, trust, love." Cole kissed her forehead gently. "And you saved me too, Nayeli. From loneliness, from the wilderness of my own heart. We saved each other." The plains stretched endlessly around them, but no longer were they intimidating, harsh, or unforgiving. Together they had faced wolves, outlaws, storms, and the wild unknown. Together they had survived, and together they had found something far more precious, a shared life, a sense of family, and the promise of love in the vast, untamed frontier dot as the sun disappeared behind the distant hills. Cole and Naeli walked back toward the settlement, hands clasped, hearts intertwined. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And in each other, they had found a home, not a physical place, but a connection that would withstand any storm, any danger, any trial. The Apache woman looked up at him, a quiet smile lighting her face. "You're my man now," she said, echoing the words that had begun their journey. "And you're my woman," Cole replied. And with that, they stepped forward into their new life, side by side, ready to face the world as partners, friends, and something even deeper, a family forged not by blood, but by courage, trust, and love.